a strange moment arrives in the lives of those who give the most. You think of the people you have always worried about, the complaining mother, the negligent husband, the adult child who still expects you to carry their weight. And you realize something frightening. You no longer feel anything. No anger, no bitterness, nor the desire to care. Society might call this depression. Some friends rush to label it emotional numbness, or even say that you're becoming selfish. You begin to panic. Have I become a bad person? Have I lost the heart I've always been so proud of? Carl Jung, who devoted his life to listening to the darkest and deepest regions of the human soul, had another name for this. He called this moment the withdrawal of libido, when the life energy you have poured out to act as an emotional firefighter for everyone begins to return to the center of your own being. It is not the death of love, but the beginning of an inner revolution, quiet yet fierce, through which you reclaim sovereignty over your own soul. But how does a child who was once so sensitive and kind grow into an adult so depleted that they have to withdraw from everything? To understand the moment you stop wanting to save everyone, we must return to the very place where the story once seemed so beautiful. The image of the good person you have carried on your shoulders your whole life. Number 1. A wound disguised as virtue. In his clinical work, Jung encountered quite a number of patients who shared a strange characteristic. They would walk into a quiet room where no one was saying anything. Yet if just one person in that room was angry, anxious, or in pain, their whole body would tighten like a stretched string. They felt their heart race, as if the other person's emotions were pouring directly into their own nervous system. Today, we call that an empath, a deeply empathic person. But Jung had already seen them long before that name appeared. To understand these people and the origins of their empathic ability, we have to mention an important concept in Jung's theory: the persona. It is the role we wear to be accepted. The dutiful child, the understanding partner, the devoted employee, the one who is always kind. In many empaths who have not yet healed, the savior mask becomes an identity that cannot be removed. You are the child who is always mending every conflict in the family. You are the pillar who cares for aging, frail parents. Or you are the eager friend who is always there to help everyone. Standing alone in the middle, you become the buffer for all the pressure pouring down from above and rising up from below. Consider the sandwich generation, pulled taut in both directions. At one end, they manage elderly parents with their anger and endless needs. At the other, they shelter adult children who still demand financial and emotional rescue. Their phone becomes a crisis hotline. If this is your reality, you are likely praised for your good heart. Gradually, you mistake loose boundaries for unconditional love. But Jung was always suspicious of things that seemed a little too virtuous. Behind the devoted exterior, he saw a truth that is much harder to swallow. This ability to read emotions may well have begun as a survival mechanism in an unhealthy family. As a child, you had to learn to observe every tiny change in your father's face, your mother's breathing, the heaviness or lightness in the footsteps in the hallway, just to guess whether your home would be peaceful tonight or whether the storm would return. You became an emotional radar, not because the universe wanted to grant you a superpower, but because if you did not do that, you would be yelled at, ignored, abandoned, or even hurt. That is the first wound, wrapped in gift paper called virtue. The more you forget it is a wound, the prouder you become of your gift. You say, I always put others first. I can understand everyone. I am the one my whole family can rely on. It sounds so noble, but if you are honest, you will notice each time you do that, a part of you steps a little further away from yourself. This is why many empaths find it very hard to accept the idea of boundaries, and why so many pieces of advice like love yourself, put yourself first, sound so good, so right. Yet when you apply them to your life, they just slip. You may understand them with your mind, but your body, Your nervous system, your whole lived history have been programmed to feel safe only when everyone around you is okay. Of course, the point here is not to dump all the blame on your parents, your culture, or your circumstances. It is true that there were things far beyond your choosing, but Jung did not stop there. If we see ourselves only as victims of the past, we will remain tied to the same old roles. He invites us to do something harder, to look at the part we ourselves are still maintaining. Why do you still choose to stay in relationships that make you wither? This question may make you uncomfortable, but it is the very first key to unlock the prison door that you have mistaken for your sacred duty. Number 2, the healer's shadow. If the persona is the mask of the good person, the eternal giver, then the shadow, in Jung's terms, is everything we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. It includes the feelings, desires, and motives we label as bad, as not allowed to exist. For an empath, behind the mask of the healer, there is often suppressed anger, a loneliness no one understands, and an exhaustion that has reached its limit. These parts do not disappear just because we dislike them. They remain deep in our unconscious, quietly shaping our lives in many different ways. One of those pathways is projection. Jung used the word projection to describe the process by which we unconsciously push what we cannot bear inside ourselves onto other people. This mechanism of projection is the reason many empaths keep falling into relationships with narcissists, addicts, and people who need to be fixed. On the surface, the story sounds very simple. I'm just a good person. I always end up with bad people. On a deeper level, a more subtle drive is at work. If the other is always weak, chaotic, in need of saving, then the savior will always have a role to play. The feeling of powerlessness in your own life is compensated by a sense of power in someone else's. But it is not only the empath who chooses wrong. On the other side, narcissists and those drowning in inner chaos also have an unconscious radar. They can sense who is the one who will forgive one more time, who will stay up listening until 2 a.m. Nocatio, who will drop all their own plans to put out fires for them. They are drawn to empaths because that is where they find 3 things: admiration, forgiveness, and endless tolerance. For a narcissist, whose ego is inflated but whose core is hollow and full of shame, someone who keeps saying, "It's okay, I understand," is like the perfect fuel source. So 2 wounds meet and believe they are destiny. One side needs to be needed. The other needs someone who will always orbit around them. Especially for empaths who have not yet healed. Helping others, in this case, is not just helping. It is also a form of control that is very hard to recognize. By continually solving problems for the other, cleaning up the mess, soothing every crisis, we anchor that person in a state of dependency. A classic story of how this pattern operates is the image of the wife of an alcoholic husband. On the surface, she is the victim. After work, she comes home and cleans up the empty bottles scattered everywhere, wipes the stains of vomit off the floor, drags her husband into bed, and in the morning calls his boss to report that he is sick. She tells her friends how miserable she is, how he exhausts her to the point where she cannot take it anymore. People nod with sympathy. "You're so kind. You've sacrificed too much." But each time she drags him through another drunken night, she protects her position. She becomes the only one who understands him, the only one who doesn't leave. His helplessness becomes her emotional insurance. On the unconscious level, there is a vague calculation at work. A healthy husband who can take care of himself could leave at any time. A broken husband, drowning in alcohol, will always come back to the only person still there every time he collapses. His helplessness becomes her emotional insurance. This is precisely the point Jung would call the healer's shadow. It is not only about giving and losing out, but about being fed, being validated, and feeling special through the very tragedy that one claims to want to end. That tragedy binds both people together, while at the same time giving each of them something they have not yet had the courage to find within themselves. Jung drew a very clear line between healthy compassion and helping that comes from egoic need. Healthy compassion respects the other person's journey. It knows when to step back so they can take responsibility for their own life. It does not try to fix everything, does not steal their lessons, does not erase every consequence just to protect its own image. Helping from egoic need is different. It cannot bear to watch the other person stumble, not only out of love, but because it cannot bear its own feeling of helplessness. In short, the difference lies within. One comes from a self that has accepted both its strength and its limits. The other comes from a self that cannot tolerate feeling small, so it has to inflate itself by carrying the whole world. Seen in the light of the shadow, the question, "Why do I always end up with bad people?" begins to change shape. It becomes, "What in me is drawn to people who are unstable?" Once you can see that sacrifice is not only love, but also a defense mechanism and a subtle strategy of control, the mind cannot return to its previous innocence. And this is when the cleansing process begins. Jung called these psychological deaths. You do not die physically, but the person you thought you were has to lie down and die forever. Number 3. The 3 psychological deaths. Jung spoke in grounded language. Whatever is built on illusion has to die so that what is real can have a place to stand. For empaths, these 3 deaths usually unfold in a very clear sequence. The first death, the identity of being needed. For many years, even decades, the feeling that everyone needs me functions like a central axis. When you begin to pull your energy back, when you start cutting down on rushing in to rescue people everywhere, the first thing that appears is not relief, but a vague, misty emptiness. The feeling of uselessness here is not just, "I can't do anything," but a kind of loss of identity's anchor point. The ego, long accustomed to defining itself by the function of saving others, begins to thrash around. It whispers, "No one needs you anymore. You're meaningless now." At a deeper level, this is the point where many people most want to go back to their old role, just to avoid the emptiness that opens up when the familiar answer to "Who am I?" is gone. Jung would say, it is precisely the ability to endure this emptiness, not rushing to fill it, not running back to every request for help, that allows this first death to be complete. The second death, the fantasy of reciprocity. After the layer of "I am needed" starts to dissolve, another layer appears, the belief that they will eventually reciprocate. Many empaths carry, endure, wait with a quiet hope that one day their parents will see everything they have done, their partner will wake up, their children will say thank you, their colleagues will recognize them, the organization will repay them. This belief is often not spoken out loud. It lives in phrases like "maybe," "who knows," "one day they'll understand." The second death occurs when reality no longer allows that fantasy to be sustained. Someone who has given a lifetime of loyalty to a company is suddenly laid off in a brief email. A grown child, after being rescued from financial or legal trouble time and again, still keeps repeating the same choices and blaming their parents for not doing enough. A spouse, no matter how many times they are forgiven, still cannot or will not change. This moment is often brutal. The truth no longer matches the story in your head. Jung often emphasized that an important part of maturity is accepting what is, instead of living only with what should be. For empaths, that means confronting. There are people who will never love you in the way you have loved them. There are relationships that will always be one-sided. There are people who, no matter how much energy you pour into them, will never become the version of themselves that you see as their potential. The pain of this death lies in the way it strips off the sacred layer of meaning we've wrapped around sacrifice. If before, Your giving was always comforted by the thought, one day they'll understand. One day it will be my turn to be held. Then now, the answer may be, they will not understand. Not because you're not good enough, but because they are not capable or have no intention of changing in that way. When the fantasy of reciprocity collapses, the years of sacrifice suddenly become bare. They are simply the years in which you chose to give more than the other person could or wanted to give back. Jung did not see this awakening as a pure tragedy. For him, it is a detoxification from illusion. When you no longer need others to repay you in order to legitimize your worth, a new inner space is set free. The third death, the martyr narrative. In many cultures, the image of the one who endures, carries everything, does not complain, is covered in a moral halo. The person who forgets themselves for others is praised. The person who takes the loss alone is seen as noble. Empaths easily swallow these images whole. Their own pain, therefore, is not just pain. It becomes part of a martyr narrative. I suffer, but I suffer for a higher purpose. I am tired, but that tiredness is proof that my love is deep enough, beautiful enough. The third death takes place when the empath realizes that most of the suffering that is gnawing at them is simply the consequence of not having boundaries. The times they stayed in a relationship long past its expiry date. The times they said yes, while inside they wanted to say no. The times they rescued others from consequences they themselves needed to face. The times they put themselves in the lower position just to keep the peace. All of that, in Jung's light, can no longer so easily be called noble. Seeing this is painful because it forces a question. If my pain is no longer a badge of honor, what is it? It is a series of choices, often unconscious, where we repeatedly overrode our own voice. Jung would not tell anyone to tear up every value around kindness or sacrifice. He simply pointed out that when pain is continually wrapped in pretty labels, it becomes very hard to learn its true lesson. The pain of lacking boundaries is different from the pain of having to make a difficult decision that is nevertheless true to yourself. One is being swept away. The other is accepting the cost of honesty. The death of the martyr narrative is the moment we stop dressing up our own self-abandonment. When these three deaths begin to happen, the identity of being needed dissolving, the fantasy of reciprocity cracking, and the martyr story losing its halo, the empath often steps into a very strange inner territory. The mind may say, this is a necessary process, but the emotions tell another story, a feeling of drifting, of being lost, as if you have just smashed, with your own hands, the only temple you ever knelt before. Jung once compared these phases to walking through a spiritual wasteland. The fences of the old roles are gone, and no new structure is yet solid enough to lean on. But it is precisely in that empty, open land, where there are no longer so many reasons to cling to old illusions, that the first seeds of a more truthful self begin to sprout. Number 4, emotional withdrawal. When an empath starts to awaken and tries something very simple, beginning to say no, it inevitably shakes the whole system. In Jung's language, this is a form of withdrawing psychic energy. The libido is no longer pouring outward to sustain everyone and everything around you, but begins to return to the center. On the outside, it looks very simple. A gentle refusal, a call you don't pick up, a message you don't reply to right away, a request for help that you pause to consider instead of automatically saying yes. Inside, for a nervous system that has survived by being always available, this is a real withdrawal from an addiction. The first feeling is usually guilt. Guilt rises like a wave of mixed heat and cold. Your heart beats faster, your stomach tightens, and in your mind, familiar voices from long ago start to echo. How can you do that? But they need you. It doesn't hurt you to try a little harder. The sentences you once heard from parents, relatives, the church, school, now become inner voices. This is the moment when the old ego, the self built around the function of rescuer, throws out its final weapon to pull you back. The feeling that you are a terrible person if you dare to stop sacrificing. Every time a request appears and you don't rush in immediately, the ego will whisper, "If you were truly a good person, you would have answered by now. Look, just one no from you, and see how much they're suffering." But remember, in this case, guilt is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. Jung saw it as the echo of an old structure trying to protect itself. Before a sense of groundedness arrives, guilt will come knocking many times, retelling every old story, just to test whether you are truly ready to step out of your old way of living or not. Number 5. The panic of the surrounding ecosystem. In many families, the empath unconsciously becomes the scapegoat, the one who absorbs all the tension, endures the suffocating atmosphere, and mediates every conflict. The system grows used to this arrangement. Whenever there's trouble, everything gets dumped in one place. When that person begins to say no, the old structure starts to shake. People often describe it like a kind of collective panic, blaming phrases such as, "You've changed," "You're so selfish," "It was never a problem before," "Why are you suddenly so difficult?" start to appear. A system, especially a family system, tends to preserve the status quo. It does not like change, even when that change is healthy. When the emotional cushion steps back, each remaining person suddenly has to face their own share. The anger that used to be smoothed over by someone else. The responsibility that used to be carried on someone else's shoulders. The sadness that always had another person there to soothe it. Instead of saying, "Maybe I need to look at myself too," most people will choose what is psychologically easier, turning to attack the one who has dared to change. Jung called this collective projection. The traits that a family or organization does not want to see in itself, selfishness, resistance to change, fear of responsibility, are thrown onto the person who is trying to step out of the old role. The one who stops sacrificing is labeled selfish, cold, disloyal, not because they have objectively become worse, but because their change forces everyone around them to look at themselves, and that is deeply uncomfortable. From Jung's perspective, this is when silence becomes a necessary form of protection, not silence used to punish or manipulate others, but silence toward the endless compulsion to explain and justify yourself. Every time you try to prove, "I'm not selfish, I still love you all," an empath can very easily slide back into the old role, stopping the arguments, stopping the effort to make them understand, is a way of not feeding more energy into the very structure that has been draining you. This does not mean cutting off communication or abandoning dialogue forever. It means acknowledging a simple truth. In the early stages, people do not want to understand. They want everything to go back to the way it was. So, instead of using up all your energy explaining, Jung would suggest keeping that energy inside to withstand the inner tremors. There will be a time for dialogue, but for now, the priority is to protect those still fragile boundaries. Alongside the open resistance, there is another, quieter consequence. The wider circles of relationship begin to thin out. When the empath stops being the entertainer, stops being the free therapist, stops showing up at every gathering just to listen to others vent, something very natural happens. Some people simply stop reaching out. This is especially easy to see in an age already marked by loneliness. Many friendships are in fact built on a very skewed axis. One side talks, the other listens. One side always has drama, the other is always putting out fires. One side constantly needs, the other constantly responds. When the one who has always responded begins to pull back, that structure no longer has any reason to exist. Many people who once believed they had a wide network of friends only realize at this stage that most of those connections were with their role, not with who they truly are. This feeling is not pleasant. Many describe it as a side effect of waking up. Hangouts become fewer, the group chats grow quiet. If you don't understand what is really happening, it's easy to jump to the conclusion, I did something wrong. I changed, so I lost everyone. But through Jung's lens, there is another way to read it. The system is restructuring itself. The image of blood filtration is quite accurate for this phase. When the body runs blood through a filter, the toxic residual elements are held back. Less blood passes through, but it is cleaner. Losing relationships that were sustained by one-sided giving is not a failure, but the inevitable result of no longer being willing to pay the old price. This does not make the emptiness less real, but it does place it in a more understandable context. The connections that were not genuine are leaving on their own. It is precisely at this point that the notion of self-preservation becomes a key word. Thinking of yourself is often labeled selfish, while in reality, there are moments when stopping, pulling back, and saying no is simply a way of preserving your psychological life. Looking at guilt from this angle does not make it disappear immediately. It will still arise, still sting, still tighten your chest when a family member blames you, when a friend slowly falls silent. But if you can sit quietly in that storm of guilt without returning to who you used to be, something like a miracle will happen. From the ashes of the people-pleaser, a new person will emerge, a person Jung would call the awakened empath. Number 6. From the unconscious to the conscious. The process of shifting from the unconscious to the conscious means that the mind slowly steps out of automatic mode and moves into a more deliberate one. In the past, your kindness operated like an instinct. If someone was in pain, you rushed in. If someone cried, you immediately soothed them. If someone asked, you said yes. After seeing your shadow, going through the depths, and feeling the tremors in the surrounding ecosystem, the empath begins to do something very different. Pause for half a second before reacting. That pause is where consciousness slips in. In that space, the question is no longer, what does this person need from me? But, does my involvement right now truly help? And what will it cost me inside? Gradually, kindness is not eliminated, but refined. There are still calls you choose to answer, evenings you still devote to a loved one in crisis. But there are also times when the answer is, I don't have the capacity today. And that decision is no longer accompanied by the same fierce self-condemnation as before. This is the first step toward what Jung called the union of opposites. Instead of having to choose between being completely soft or completely hard, the empath learns to keep a sensitive heart and, at the same time, a steadier psyche. Compassion does not disappear, but it stands beside firmness, not beneath it. Gentleness is still there. It simply no longer has to be paid for with self-abandonment. The result is that your energy is no longer scattered. Acts of care start to come from a place with less fear, less need to prove yourself. The empath does not become a cold, unfeeling rock, but becomes a stream with banks. That stream still flows, still nourishes, but is no longer so easily diverted out of its own riverbed. And it is precisely in this conscious state that even deeper qualities find the ground they need to grow. Number 7. 3. New empowering qualities. The first quality is ruthless discernment. This may sound harsh, but at its core, it is not about being ruthless with others. It is about being ruthless with your own illusion. In the past, empaths tended to see everyone through the lens of potential, seeing the good side behind someone who keeps hurting them, seeing the future that could happen instead of the present that is actually unfolding, seeing the wounded child behind the narcissist. The new clarity is the capacity to look directly at what is there without adding or subtracting. In practice, it shows up very simply. When meeting someone new, instead of automatically explaining things away for them, looking for reasons for their behavior. The empath begins to observe more carefully. They pay attention to how this person treats service staff, how they talk about their ex, how they react to a small boundary. Intuition, which has always been their natural strength, still operates, but this time it is trusted more. If the feeling inside is something is off, they no longer rush to shut it down with phrases like, "Maybe I'm just too sensitive." Everyone has a good side. The ruthless part lies in this. Once they see, they act according to what they see. They no longer offer a third, fourth chance to patterns that are clearly repeating. Someone who constantly breaks boundaries. Someone who only shows up when there is something to gain. Someone who uses their emotions to control. They do not turn into a harsh judge condemning everyone, but they stop betraying their intuition just to maintain a beautiful image of the other. The inner softness is still there, but now it is accompanied by eyes that are far more awake. Strategic availability is the second quality. When still being pulled around by old wounds, empaths tend to be present everywhere. In every midnight phone call, every tense group chat, every project that needs someone to carry the load. They are like an inexhaustible resource. Whoever needs them has them. But an unlimited resource exists only in imagination. In reality, the body, the nervous system, time, and money all have limits. As they step into a more mature phase, they begin to treat their presence as a kind of asset that needs to be allocated wisely. They ask themselves, which relationships are truly two-way? Where am I genuinely heard and seen, rather than just used as an emotional dumpster? Which projects align with my values and my capacity, instead of being just places where I fill a gap? This does not turn them into cold, calculating people. It helps them become more aware that every act of showing up has a cost. Saying yes to a 3-hour venting session means saying no to an evening of recovery, to a meaningful conversation with someone who truly values them, or simply to a much-needed quiet space. Strategic availability is the ability to place those moments of presence where they actually generate life, instead of scattering them everywhere, just to maintain the image of always there for you. A simple image is that of a skilled doctor. A good doctor cannot see patients for free, without limit, 24/7 for an entire city, no matter how big their compassion is. They need to sleep, eat, study, live. The mature empath gradually learns a similar lesson. For their love to have real quality, they need to know when to retreat, when to set limits, when to say, "Today I don't have the capacity to hear this story, but I care about you." The third quality is inner sovereignty. This is perhaps the deepest transformation. In the early stages, an empath's self-worth is often measured by other people's reactions. Whether they are grateful, whether they need you, whether they reassure you that you're not selfish. Every "you're so kind," every grateful tear, every "I don't know what I'd do without you," feels like another vote for "I am worthy." As you step back from certain roles, these sources of validation become fewer. Without another place to anchor your sense of value, it is very easy to fall back into the old spiral. Inner sovereignty begins when that axis of valuation shifts from the outside to the inside. Instead of asking, "What do they think of me?" the question becomes, "What do I know about myself?" Jung once said that maturity comes as we slowly move our center of gravity from living under the gaze of the collective to living along the axis of our own soul. For empaths, this shows up in the ability to set a boundary without needing the whole room to applaud. They can decline a request without attaching a long essay to prove they are not a bad person. People like Oprah Winfrey are often mentioned as living examples of this quality. She began life with a deeply traumatic childhood, born into poverty, sexually abused when she was young, pregnant in her teenage years. Her early life contained many factors that could have kept someone forever stuck in the role of victim or the one who carries everything for the family. And yet, through many years of facing herself, through therapy, and through telling her life story with honesty, Oprah has built a life piece in which compassion and boundaries walk side by side. On television, she is the one who has listened to thousands of painful stories, offering her guests a kind of presence that is rarely seen. But in her personal life, she is also known as someone who knows her own limits. She built her own business, chose a small number of close relationships that are deep rather than wide, and speaks very frankly about not being able to meet every expectation of every viewer. The way she is loved does not come from being a doormat for everyone, but from standing firmly in her own story before reaching out her hand to others. These three qualities do not appear overnight, nor are they goals to be checked off. They are like three lines gradually emerging on the face of someone who has walked through much loss without abandoning themselves one more time. Ruthless discernment keeps them from lying to themselves about others. Strategic availability helps them place their kindness in the right places. Inner sovereignty helps them stand tall, even when no one is clapping. And in that combination, the empath is no longer the life raft everyone clings to until it sinks, but becomes a solid bank of earth, a place where they themselves can also sit down, breathe, and finally call their own life by its true name. Number 8. Breaking the generational curse. When an empath begins to have boundaries, to be selective about their presence, and to stand firm in inner sovereignty, the effects reach far beyond the immediate results. Jung once said, "Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent." What is not properly worked through in one generation often flows down to the next as destiny. When someone stops and begins to work with their own shadow, they are not only saving themselves, but quietly altering the course of that whole stream. In everyday language, a generational curse is the set of patterns that repeat over and over. The same type of parents, the same type of conflicts, the same type of silence, the same type of sacrifice, as if copy-pasted from life to life. In Jung's eyes, these are family complexes, emotional bundles of beliefs and reactions that are not passed down through explicit teaching, but through the way people actually live, love, get angry, go quiet, endure. It is like a kind of emotional DNA, invisible to the eye, yet present in every daily interaction. A mother who grew up in a deeply conflictual home, where as a little girl she had to read her father's moods, soothe an unstable mother, and carry the emotions of the whole house, can very easily grow up with a hidden belief. If I want the family not to fall apart, I must always care, always know, always control things before they go too far. When she has children of her own, especially a child entering adolescence, that belief rises up strongly under a much more acceptable name: love. That is the somewhat tragic story of a friend of mine, a middle-aged woman, hardworking, devoted to her family, with a 15-year-old daughter. In her eyes, her daughter lives in a world full of danger: social media, substances, peer pressure. She checks her daughter's grades every day, searches for unusual signs in her messages, and bombards her with questions after every outing: who she went with, what time she came home, whether anyone drank alcohol. She walks into her daughter's room without knocking, with the justification, "There's nothing in this house that needs to be hidden." Every one of these behaviors carries the label, "Mom just wants what's best for you." The daughter, from her side, feels watched, distrusted, and suffocated. She closes her door more often, keeps her phone with her at all times, and responds to questions with silence or irritation. The conflict escalates. The more the mother worries, the tighter she grips. The more the daughter resists, the more she withdraws. In between them is a thick emotional atmosphere, saturated with one feeling, that no one is truly being seen. It was only in therapy that my friend slowly came to see something painful but crucial. Most of the fear driving her did not come from her daughter's actual life in the present, but from her own memories. Sleepless childhood nights listening to doors slam, school days spent gauging whether her mother was happy or sad before daring to ask for lunch money. The many times she silently vowed, "When I have children, I'll never let them go through this." She realized that her overprotectiveness was a desperate attempt to control what the little girl she once was had never been able to control. In that moment, a new line was drawn between the mother she is today and the child she once was. Instead of continuing to use her daughter as a way to soothe her own anxiety, she began making small changes, knocking before entering her daughter's room, turning interrogations into a few short, clear questions, and accepting, "I don't want to talk about it," without immediately spinning it into catastrophe. Only then did the relationship between mother and daughter slowly begin to improve over time. It was a small moment, but from Jung's perspective, it was proof that a generational curse was loosening. The child no longer had to act as therapist for her mother, as the mother once did. The child was no longer forced to become the object onto whom adult anxiety was dumped. She was allowed to have secrets, to make mistakes, to have quiet periods, while the mother learned to tend to her own nervous system through therapy, friends, and personal practices. Breaking a generational curse does not mean that the relationship becomes perfect or that there are never arguments again. Jung would see it more humbly. If, in each generation, there is even one person willing to turn back and face their own shadow, then the unconscious burden carried by the next generation will be a little lighter. When an empath stops holding all the roles, they give others in the system a chance to stand on their own feet. And for Jung, that may be one of the greatest gifts a mature soul can leave to those who come after. By now, you can probably see more clearly. The moment you stop trying to save everyone is not the moment your heart breaks, but the moment you stop using it in the wrong places. From an exhausted savior, you return to being a whole, ordinary human, someone who knows weariness, fear, and need, but also knows how to say no, how to choose, and how to guard their own soul. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." As you withdraw your energy from old roles, accept the 3 deaths, and walk through the wasteland of silence, you are coming very close to that privilege. You are not only saving yourself from the endless loop of sacrifice, you are also quietly bending the direction of an entire lineage, teaching those who come after that love does not have to be paid for with the abandonment of self. If you feel this video has touched something deeper in you, please help it reach those who are also exhausted from being the good one by clicking like, sharing it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribing to the channel. We will continue to walk together through other deep layers of Jung, of healing, and of the journey toward becoming a whole human. A whole human, not just a life raft for other people's lives.